Hi and welcome to my vlog 1 on skills versus capacities in the weight room. Today we will examine the back squat and the deadlift, evaluating two cases for each exercise that present either a lack of skill or a lack of capacity. Please bear in mind that only the most significant coaching observations led to the categorization within the two categories. For instance, one athlete may be categorized as lacking capacity while simultaneously presenting skill-related issues. We will start with beginner lifter Stephanie and her squat. I asked Stephanie to show me her natural bodyweight squat without cueing her technical form. We can see that she possessed decent flexibility and mobility at the involved joints. The most notable thing during the movement was a slight butt wink in the deepest position. This can be attributed to a narrow stance and her straightforward pointing feet, which induce a more internally rotated femur relative to the hip. Therefore, I advised her to take a slightly wider stance and position her feet slightly more outward during loaded conditions. Afterwards, she presented some pretty good repetitions of the squatting pattern, with a very straight bar path and normal movement variability in respect to her lifting experience level and sporting background. When we further increased the load on the bar, we could see that she is cutting depth of the squat and increasing movement variability. Specifically, we can detect that the bar rotates a little bit in the transversal plane of motion, which becomes most evident during the transition phase from the eccentric to the concentric phase. When watching her from the back view, we can also see that the bar is slightly tilting in the frontal plane. Taking a closer look at potential causative factors of these issues, we can see that her pelvis does not rotate or shift in any direction and that the knees travel straight forward above the toes. The limiting factor can be found more upwards, in her upper back. This does not provide a stable enough surface for the bar. To solve this problem, I advised Stephanie to pull her shoulder blades together and also to pull down on the bar, attempting to bend it across the back. Although not completely resolving the problem, it is very obvious that this created a much more stable movement pattern, which will certainly become better with some more practice over time. After successfully completing her first squatting session, Stephanie had to take a short coffee break before returning to the gym. And if you're a powerlifter like me, then you certainly know that things get most interesting when the bar has to be pulled from the floor. This held true for Stephanie's deadlift session as well. After demonstrating the proper lifting technique to Stephanie, she tried to execute the movement with the empty bar first. First, I told her to focus on initiating the movement by pushing back the hips and keeping the bar over her midfoot during both the ascending and the descending parts of the lift. This worked pretty well for creating a hinging motion at the hip joint, but the bar path didn't become as straight as I would like to see. Due to this, I provided Stephanie with some video feedback of her movement. Up-to-date research has proven that video feedback is an effective strategy in improving the technical execution of deadlifts. And as you can see, this strategy proved to be effective. The bar path remained in a much more straighter line in the ascending as well as in the descending part of the motion. After completing several successful repetitions, we increased the weight on the barbell to 30 kilograms. Initially, I let her do some repetitions, trying to observe if any further changes could be provoked through the increased load. I think she did well, except her lat activation revealed to be not sufficient, which is indicated by the protracted shoulder position in the lower range of the movement. Because Stephanie had already mastered the simple hinging motion, I instructed her to adopt a more upright torso angle and to shift her knees more forward when the bar was passing the knees. Indeed, this two-phasic hinging motion is more difficult to coordinate, but I hoped that the inherently greater shoulder extension would create a more efficient position for the lats to produce force. As you can see, this strategy led to some improvement, but could not prevent it entirely. Due to this, we implemented a lat activation exercise. Stephanie was supposed to get into a deadlift specific position while trying to engage the latissimus muscles under tension. I also cued her to sit back more. Overall, this created a well-coordinated position and in consequence a great connection of the upper back and the gluteal muscles via the fascia thoracolumbalis. Following this intervention, Stephanie's deadlifting technique further stabilized. Now just enjoy and appreciate the great movement quality which she acquired in that short amount of time. Our next athlete is Moritz, who can be considered as an experienced lifter in respect to his long history of resistance training. Moritz's squatting pattern showed only minor deficiency under unloaded and low intensity conditions. From the frontal view, we can detect that he needs relatively high amounts of hip external rotation to get into a deep position, a challenge he addressed by pushing his knees strongly outwards. We corrected that by taking a wider stance to create a more stable base of support and to ensure the anterior translation of the knee above the big toe. The second minor issue was that Moritz exhibited a forward shift of the bar path during the descending part of his squat. This could be attributed to the deviating center of mass of the system resulting from the increasing loads. As he progressed to higher intensities, we observed that his bar path became straighter during the descending phase of the lift. When progressing to even higher loads, we could detect that the bar path is increasingly shifting forward at the beginning of the concentric phase. Moritz told me that he thinks this is due to his recent training history in front squatting. Therefore, I advised him to show me his front squat with 150 kg to compare it with the back squatting condition. It revealed that he could front and back squat the same amount of weight with approximately the same velocity, leading me to the conclusion that his strength is currently more developed in his quadriceps muscle than in the extensors of his posterior chain. In consequence of that, I recommended him to include more exercises for the aforementioned. The next trainee is Andreas. He competed in powerlifting at the regional level several times, indicating that he has quite a long training history in deadlifting. Therefore, it is no wonder that he displays excellent technical execution of the lift with only minimal movement variability during the first sets. Even with increasing loads and fatigue during multiple repetition sets, he managed to maintain the appropriate form. Therefore, we had to go very close to the limit of his capabilities to detect potential limitations. During the lift-off with 160 kg, we can detect a slightly greater vertical translation of the hip joint relative to the shoulder joint, at least in some repetitions. This is indicated by the red line. Consequently, an increase of the strain on the back extensor muscle group while decreasing the demands on the knee extensors is experienced. This movement strategy becomes more evident when lifting at even higher loads, as shown in the video. According to the former Austrian powerlifting national team coach and biomechanist Alexander Pürzel, this indicates a lack of quadriceps strength in the lift-off position. The lifter should implement more general strength training of the quadriceps and deadlift derivatives, specifically targeting the joint angles in the lift-off position. Further strategies can include pre-exhaustion techniques of the hamstring muscles, for example with hamstring curl variations prior to deadlifting, which potentially constrains the synergistically acting quadriceps to a higher activation during the lift-off. Caution is warranted with this strategy because there exists conflicting literature on this topic. In my experience, to make this strategy work, it is important to fatigue the muscle in the specific muscle length and joint angle to a large degree and to complete the subsequent exercise with minimal rest to avoid recovery of the pre-exhausted muscles. Otherwise, the athlete could end up turning the pre-exhaustion more into a pre-activation, which would facilitate the current movement strategy even further. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my vlog 1 on skills versus capacities in the weight room. For references, please check out the video description and see you next time.